add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
Finding someone on the internet is not hard anymore. And so the hard part is now, how do you get them to talk to you? How do you get them to interact and engage with you when they're claiming not to be looking for a job?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are no longer on the floor show floor.
Show floor at
See,
HR Tech.
That's the problem with doing a podcast in the morning. A podcast needs to be recorded in the evening, and yet for some reason, I guess we like to inflict pain and record things always in the morning, most recently.
Well, we've got our coffee and our cheery attitudes.
Cheery attitudes.
And we're here.
Yeah. Folks, that's Lisa Holden, of course, my lovely co-host here at Hiring on All Cylinders. We are so excited to no longer be in the oxygen-infused show floor at HR Tech. We are in our comfortable office here back in San Francisco. I guess the calm before the storm of Dreamforce next week.
Absolutely. We're staring at the new Salesforce tower out our window here.
It's everywhere.
And we can feel the buzz from Dreamforce coming together. But of course, we're here and we're excited. Sean, I read an interesting article this morning in NPR talking about a recent BLS report saying that really the headline is there are more job openings than there are unemployed people.
So just like full stop, there are more jobs than there are unemployed people?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so obviously that has some significance. We were just talking about and can't believe the fact that 10 years ago was the Great Recession.
Great Recession, yeah, where it was really scary for a lot of people worried about losing their jobs, a lot of people who did lose their jobs. And today, I mean, unemployment is effectively at zero or negative.
I mean, the thing that just blows my mind again, though, is 10 years.
I know.
I mean, it feels like just yesterday that so much of that happened and transpired. You were talking about your first job and like getting into the workforce at that time.
I was in my first job, and it was really scary because I figured this was just how work worked. You know, I was in my first job, and I was entry level at this PR agency, and we were all feeling the effects of the recession, and they ended up laying off basically everyone at my level. There were two of us that survived that. And I was like, man, when is this going to end? I hate the recession. But I think it taught us a lot about grit during that time, which is an important lesson. And it's crazy to see how far we've come. And today we're in a situation where everyone I know is employed. Everyone seems to have a job. Certainly there are people who don't, but from what the BLS is reporting, it seems like we are in the greatest situation in terms of unemployment that we've been in half a century. Yeah. Which is pretty incredible.
Well, another interesting statistic, though, as part of that report was that the share of workers quitting their jobs each month is also the highest that it's been, I think, in 15, 16, 17 years.
Right.
And I think that's actually representative of a lot of the trends that we tend to dive into on this podcast, right? Talking about how the job market is so competitive right now that candidates really can jump to a different opportunity and find themselves in, greener fields, better opportunities. And so there is this openness to changing jobs, to leaving a current job, which, I was talking to my parents and other attorneys in their generation. And they were like, oh no, loyalty is paramount. Mm-hmm. Like, why are you going to take the sabbatical and travel the world? And I have a lot of friends that have done that because they know when they come back, their skill set is such that they know they're going to be in demand.
Employees have so much confidence right now. Even people who are willing to jump ship and not sure where they're going next,
where they're going to land.
Effectively unemployed people have so much confidence right now. It's really, really interesting to look at a marketplace like this. And it's great for us all of us as individuals, but it presents all of these problems for employers and recruiters. I mean, I was hearing folks say at HR Tech how candidates are literally employed people who have accepted the job are ghosting on their first day of work. They're not showing up. Yeah.
What?
They'll accept the job and then not show up.
Okay, that's just like bad. That's bad juju.
This is a whole other podcast. We're getting on a tangent.
True. Okay, wait. So I guess then to bring this back, to corral it back, this, report and this article that we're kind of referring to about jobs and number of unemployed people and all that jazz, obviously is specific to the United States.
Right.
But talent and talent demand obviously is a much broader, much more global issue that's facing society today.
Well, we should talk to someone who knows more about talent acquisition on a global scale than we do.
Huh. I wonder who that'd be. We could get someone on the line real quick.
I think we should get someone on the line.
Okay, perfect. So without further ado, we'll welcome our next guest, Abakar Saidov. Abakar is the CEO at Beamery, a platform based in London that is trying to address these problems of a talent shortage in such a competitive marketplace. Abakar, how's it going?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing pretty well. It's a sunny day here in San Francisco.
How is it on your side of the pond?
Oh, nice pun. I like that.
Oh, perfect. No, London's actually been great. I actually only just got back here this week. I was on your side of the pond for the last few weeks. But no, it's wonderful here.
Awesome. Glad to hear. Every single time I've been to London, I feel like it's been like it's put on its best dress clothes for me, and it's sunny and it's not too foggy. And so every single time someone's like, "Oh, we're going to London," I'm like, "Ooh, can I go? Can I go in your suitcase?"
It's always like this. What are you talking about? It never rains here.
Oh, never rains?
It's just the best weather.
I'm totally joking.
That's what it's famous for, of course.
Of course, sunny beaches. That's London.
So now that we know where you live, tell us a bit about who you are and what Beamery does.
Sure. So I'm one of the founders here at Beamery, and Beamery, maybe it'll be helpful to kind of tell you where we started from to kind of give you a picture of what we do. But on a high level, Beamery is a talent engagement platform, and we essentially focus on the entire candidate lifecycle, from someone becoming aware of your brand and who you are, all the way through to managing that candidate experience and journey, through to someone becoming an applicant and an employee, and potentially even eventually an alumni of the business. And where we started from was this idea that online you're not a candidate or a customer, you're just someone browsing the internet. And if you think about how much evolution's happened in the way that organizations target potential customers, and the real focus over the last decade has been on providing value. It's not just interrupting you with an ad and flogging you some product. It's about building awareness, building connection and engagement, and ultimately loyalty to your brand. And whereas when you look at the talent space, it's still the same thing we've been doing for 20 or 30 or 40 years, where it's like, here's a job, do you want it or not? And we thought, how do you change that? How do you actually really focus on, it's not about the job, it's about you're an individual we want to build a relationship with, and we're a company that you identify as the potential place that you want to contribute to. And there's a lot of things that need to fall into place. There's timing, there's mission, there is skill set, and we wanted to build a solution that really enabled those kinds of behaviors, both from the candidate side and from the talent acquisition professional.
Interesting. So I think that trend where it used to be just, here's a job, do you want it or not, to actually needing to build that awareness and loyalty to a brand. Do you think that this has been kind of expedited by the current marketplace that we're in, with the current shortage and just the sheer number of open opportunities there are? Or do you think we would have gotten here no matter what?
That's a good question. I think it's definitely been expedited now, because the question we always get, especially from investors, is what's changed? Why now? Why haven't people done this before? And there's actually a couple of things. First is obviously, yes, the talent markets are a lot more competitive. And in many ways, it's also because the basic problems in many ways have been solved. For example, most organizations, rightly or wrongly, believe that they now know once a resume hits their desk what to do with it. There's been a lot of investment in screening, in interviewing and scheduling, and you've kind of solved the basics of what to do with someone once they're in front of you. And so the next challenge to be competitive, companies are going, well, now what? Now I need to go out there and get those people that are not applying. How do I do that? And there's outbound methodologies like sourcing, inbound things through marketing. And the biggest, I think, advent has been technologies like Intello and LinkedIn and others, which allow you to go and find the people, because that's been the real democratizing force in the space, where before you had to have this like little black book that you had to go to an executive recruiter and find someone. Finding someone on the internet is not hard anymore.
No.
And so the hard part is now, how do you get them to talk to you? How do you get them to interact and engage with you when they're claiming not to be looking for a job?
Absolutely. We talk about this issue all the time, and it's so interesting to see the trends evolved, right? Because when job boards kind of came on the scene, it was this amazing look at all of the available jobs in any given area. And then as social networking sites became popular for professionals, you have this situation where you have all the data about these open jobs and all the data about those who can fill them. And so it's really interesting to see automation take over in this way today, now that we have access to all this data, and we watch recruiting automation become this very important trend.
Exactly. And so the why now aspect is, without the data, you couldn't do this.
Exactly.
It all starts with data. And I think there was this huge focus on like just data as its own kind of subject matter. And what's interesting is that we've created these mountains of data, right? You're talking about large organizations, the Facebooks, the Googles of the world, that literally just are sitting on treasure troves. And now it's kind of like, okay, what do we do with that? And I think that kind of parlays very well into the work that Beamery is doing, into the work that other organizations are doing, which is saying there is this data. Now let's figure out how we can act on it to actually get some insights and move the cart forward.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Wanted to kind of keep it topical about the global aspect here of recruiting. And there are obviously a couple things that are happening specific to the UK, specifically that are going to impact Beamery and many, I'm sure, of your customers and clientele in that part of the world. And that's the Brexit. And noticed and watched some recent footage of you talking about Brexit and the impact that that may have on the talent marketplace. Would love if you could kind of give us an overview of your take on what potential impacts we may see and yeah, I guess how you see that kind of playing out.
So, I mean, it's obviously a sensitive topic, and my goal is not to be taking sides on anything, but
yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the immediate impacts is, if you look at places like London, it has a very large services sector, professional services, business services, financial services, etc. So you have a lot of banks and consulting firms who have had to make decisions as to where their people are based, because Brexit has a huge impact on everything from people's legal working status in the country all the way through to the way taxation is treated and inter-border money movements and people movements. And so what's been happening already is a lot of organizations, especially European banks, are moving headquarters, moving people to other locations, whether it's Switzerland or whether it's Germany or France. And so there's been a noticeable exodus of within certain professions out of London already. What's been really interesting is obviously at the same time, the visa status of a lot of Europeans is changing, because essentially there's been communication out there to say, if you have been in the country for X amount of time, if you're European, your status as being able to be employed here will be in place. But new people who could have been coming here, for example, if you're a French person who wants to move to the UK to seek employment, before that was super easy. There was no paperwork. You just could use your passport. Now that's actually going to require you to go through the traditional visa process that, say, an American would have to go through. So labor mobility is going to change, which is interesting because it means that the way organizations think about the available pool of talent is going to be different in Europe. And I think the flip side is organizations that really focus on becoming visa sponsors. So, for example, we as a company are a visa sponsor and did so very early, gain a competitive advantage.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right that, I mean, what this essentially does is narrow the talent pool even further for certain organizations. Organizations in France might all of a sudden find themselves restricted a little bit in being able to recruit effectively without necessarily that visa sponsorship and the extra kind of hoops that are, come with that process, and thus recruit more narrowly.
which will do interesting things to both obviously salaries and people's stickiness in various locations. And so obviously this dovetails into lots of impacts. I think that it does the opposite effects that you would get from globalization and free trade and labor movement.
Yeah. 100%. And so that's Brexit. And if that wasn't enough, it seems like the EU is like, let's just complicate things further. Let's make this a whole bunch of fun, and GDPR. So what have you seen? Obviously, you deal with data as an organization such as Beamery. So what does that really mean to you? What does that mean to your customers? And how are people reacting to that kind of in your experience?
It's a great question. So we looked at this a little bit more holistically. The concept of data governance and compliance is not new in the talent space generally. In the US, you have everything from CAN-SPAM to EEO, you have the Internet Applicant Rule, and every country and every organization every country has its own rules and regulations. For example, in places like Germany and Northern Europe, you already had rules around how long you can store candidate data for. I think in some places you have to delete them after a month or 3 months. Some places you even have to delete all your emails every 3 months. And so, I'm not even kidding. So what we've had to, so this is not, what's happened is it's been formalized into something that is a global directive that affects European countries. And the reality is, if you think of this from a system administrator or CIO perspective, there really hasn't been a lot of introduction of technology that allows you to measure compliance with all of these different moving pieces, particularly effectively. So we saw that as a really big opportunity, and without plugging ourselves too hard, we thought, let's make something that is industry leading in the talent acquisition space, compliance suite of products that allows you to not only do GDPR, but do all of the other things I mentioned, whether it's, where is the data going correctly into the right data centers to comply with our specific country regulation? Are we doing EEO and GDPR at the same time? And so we thought, because we're, as you said before, we handle data, we also handle communication, we were uniquely positioned to be able to provide a solution for this.
That's a brilliant lead into our next discussion topic, which is actually about an announcement that we have to share with our listeners and our blog readers today, which is that Intello and Beamery are entering into an exciting partnership. So just to give a quick recap on that, Intello customers know that they can use our platform to search for candidates, and we have a database of 500 million candidate profiles. And as they search for candidates, they can get proprietary insights on what those candidates are like. And that matters a lot for your recruiting function when it comes to candidates for specific open roles. But the partnership we have with Beamery allows us to sort of integrate all of this great candidate insight into not necessarily your candidates for specific roles, but your general candidate pool. So can you talk a little bit about why that's so important?
Absolutely. So firstly, to echo your point, we're super excited to work with Intello, and we think there's a lot of very complementary use cases here. And specifically, it's kind of that statement I made a few minutes ago. The strength of the different platforms is around identification of talent, and that's, I think, what Intello really excels in, is who are the right individuals for your business and at what time. And the next step is essentially to continue to create that engagement, build the pipelines of talent, and then focus really on how to identify and move those people through that pipeline over time and create a great candidate experience on that journey. And so together, I think the tools really complete the life cycle of from that initial finding touch points and reach out all the way through to bringing someone through to an offer.
Yeah. And I think, talking about the different phases of a candidate life cycle, the integrated kind of aspects of different platforms become so much more important. And, this is something that, Lisa, you and I heard quite a bit. And, Abakar, I'm sure you heard this as well at HR Tech, was around there are all of these different pieces of technology. There are already all these different aspects of recruiting and talent acquisition and onboarding that right now seem so fragmented. And so I think partnerships like this, I'm very much in the same camp where I think that this is going to be phenomenal. If you can connect these dots, it makes it that much more fluid.
Absolutely. These integrations are really, really critical for the common recruiter who already has too much on their plate. And so making candidate information accessible from various platforms in one place is really critical to their success.
And what I'd add to that actually is when we speak to our customers about what they're looking to do is create data parity and continuity. So, for example, if you're looking at a potential prospect in Intello, you also want to be able to know immediately, oh, they're actually someone we chose not to hire for a different role.
Yep.
But that information isn't in Intello today. You should also know, oh, this is someone who's currently in 3 processes and we've already got recruiters talking to them. And so you're really focusing on both, again, those pillars of you have your candidate experience as one stakeholder and then ultimately your users and their efficiency as the other.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So when we think about, obviously we're excited about this partnership and we think we have a lot of complementary offerings to bring to the table. But if you were talking to an employer who was skeptical, perhaps, why should that employer care about this?
I think there's a couple of reasons. Presumably the employer that is already a customer of one or the other. And I think it's, at the end of the day, it comes back to strategically, what is an organization trying to do? I'll give you an example. For a lot of technology firms, when you ask their CEOs or heads of talent, what are your current biggest initiatives and priorities? One of the things that comes up a lot is topics like diversity. And so if you dig a little bit deeper and you say, well, what are you doing about diversity? And they say, well, we're hiring whatever the targets are, whether it's more female software engineers or more people of certain ethnicities, however they define it. And then the next question we ask is, okay, and how are you doing that effectively? Where are you moving the needle? Because just opening more jobs that have that kind of bias doesn't solve the problem. Do you have pipelines? Do you have measurable, quantifiable evidence that you're contacting more people like that and that you're actually getting them through into your process and that actually the initiatives of building diversity is yielding results? And usually there's a blank stare.
Yeah.
And so what we've found is the executive should care because this is the only way they can tie what they're saying is important to them with the results and the initiatives that they're driving.
Yeah, I mean, actually having the data to prove the processes that you're implementing are working, it's necessary. And it's exciting that this is finally, I feel like, being tackled. And I think it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, in that without the data, this is impossible. We can't analyze the process that we have built. We can't define the pain outside of anecdotes. And anyone that's ever managed or anyone that's ever headed up a department, without that kind of information, you're just kind of trying to swing at thin air and you can't necessarily connect.
Right. And not only can you not prove the results, prove that it's working, but you can't fight for more resources and dollars to say this is something that not only, I've proven that can work, but we need to do more of it. And here's how much more, and here's what we need for that. So
yeah, it's actually quantifying the issue, and it's putting hard numbers and dollar signs, which, as we all know, if you're trying to make a business case, if you can't connect a dollar sign to it, it's
not going to happen.
No, it's tough luck. Like I don't know if you can do it. And as fundamentally important diversity is, for so long that hasn't been quantified. And now we're starting to get to that point where we have some data, we have some statistics, and that then empowers organizations, recruiters, talent acquisition leaders, many of you listeners, to be able to go out into the marketplace, whether that's for candidates and say, hey, our organization has improved diversity and here are the statistics. This is why this matters. It correlates to performance in this way, or empowers them through the process of going out and looking at vendors to be able to say, this vendor is going to have this impact on my bottom line.
Absolutely. I think if we were to poll our listeners a couple of years ago for forward-looking predictions, they would have said that data and analytics will become more important in increasing years. So Abakar, we'd love to ask you as our final question here, if you were to look into the future, what are your predictions for how employers will go about acquiring talent?
And this is a long question. I think there's a couple of areas that I like to think about, and I will use these words with kind of some preface. There's been a lot of talk around automation and the mythical AI, and so one of the things that we think a lot about is what in practice is important for to change, and which things are actually kind of just vaporware and are kind of like nice shiny things that don't really do anything. And I think what looking into the future, and some of this is, I guess, what I hope changes is that interaction point with the experiences that people have with companies should be bespoke and personalized and exciting. You should be able to, from every interaction, feel like you're getting to know the business more, rather than have that experience of I applied for a job and I didn't hear back for 4 weeks. And I think from a company's perspective, it's what we talked about, is moving to that proactive talent model, which means that a couple of things need to become true. For example, starting to do skills-based recruiting rather than vacancy-based recruiting. So rather than posting jobs, it's starting to think, well, where do we need to be 12 months from now, 24 months from now? What does that skill set look like, geography set look like? And so it's the interconnectivity between things like ERP systems telling you we need more. Our sales targets are going up, to the recruiting system being able to say that means we need to create more sales jobs. And by the way, the current target markets of Boston are not enough, and you should be looking at adjacent markets like Philadelphia. It's being able to then augment the way that your career sites look like and the way that you communicate with prospects based on the type of personality they are. So there's a lot of things which I think we would classify as AI assist, where you're not replacing humans, you're making humans better at their jobs. And for me, that's ultimately the employers will be able to make better and more meaningful connections with people earlier in the cycle.
And I think that's perfect. And it ties back to, hopefully helping us solve that now problem, I guess, in that we have more jobs than we do unemployed people. And so now, can we actually do a better job of pairing the right candidate with the right job, evolving the candidates that could be the right fit for the right job, and connecting all of those pieces together to make sure that we're more productive and providing a better service to society as a whole.
More productive, more strategic. That sounds like a future I want to be a part of.
Exactly. Hey, Abakar, thank you so much for joining. This has been a blast. And we look forward to continuing conversations, to our budding partnership, and wherever that may go. But thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.